Welcome back to the morning show here on Rise News with me, Katira King. Now, Nigeria is the world's fourth largest producer of cocoa, and most of its cocoa is exported for processing abroad. Finished cocoa-based products like chocolates and sweets are almost always imported into the country. Nigeria's oldest cocoa community is, however, slowly trying to change that by producing handmade Eti-Oni, a brand of chocolate made from cocoa obtained straight from their farms. In a move that looks like the revival of the pre-colonial cocoa wonder in the southwestern part of the country, the newly revived Osun State Cocoa Processing Factory has achieved a daily 20,000 tons of cocoa processing. So today on Our Take, we ask the ways in which governmental leaders and policymakers can champion the transformation of the rural economies of African countries as the fastest way to lift millions of people out of poverty. I'm joined by His Royal Majesty OBA DOKUN and NGOZI OMAMBALA to discuss. Good morning again.
Good morning.
So we're talking food, politics, and everything in between. Now, I asked the question how we think leaders, or what we think leaders can be doing in order to ensure that their citizens are not afflicted by poverty, to make sure that they can eat on a daily basis, that infrastructure is correct within their communities. As a leader yourself, what do you think they should be doing? Or you all should be doing?
We all should be doing. Well, I'm doing my bit.
You are?
Yeah, I'm trying to do my bit. But the political structure, so to speak, should also be doing a lot. And what are they supposed to do? We keep on saying the government should make a viable environment for investment and for all this. But it's actually beyond that. I feel everything starts from a position of definition.
Yes.
How do we define rural? How do we define poverty? How do we define wealth?
Right.
And that's where all these problems are. I said earlier on in some other forum, if we go into Spain, a rural community or rural communities like Alicante or Murcia, right, they're 1 hour apart and they have international airports.
Right.
But in Africa here, we define rural.
Well, the rural, they don't even have electricity, much less an airport.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I don't want to define my place as a poor place. Right. Because we have wealth. We have cocoa, we have our land. Even if we don't have cocoa, if we don't have the land, we have the human resource. So everything is a resource, but you have to just define those things for wealth creation. Yes. And that's what it's all about. So the governments need to actually structure out all these communities so that, and define each community for its own purpose. Right. For wealth creation. As opposed to a general blanket statement. Exactly, yes. Okay, so in terms of hunger, because it's one of those watchwords that has been thrown around and bandied about so often that I do feel as though it's lost its meaning, like you said. Now, there are a few facts that I want to present to you. So, close to 800,000 children under the age of 5 are suffering from severe acute malnutrition in the Lake Chad region, including 450,000 of them in Nigeria, 500,000 in Niger, 63,000 in Cameroon, and 22,000 in Chad. At the same time last year, 475,000 children suffered from severely acute malnutrition in the whole region. In Nigeria, a total of 5.2 million people are food insecure, and 50,000 are already living in famine-like conditions. And at the Oslo Conference for the Lake Chad Basin on the 24th of February of this year, 14 donors pledged $672 million for Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria, of which $460 million was for 2017. So far, 84% of that total fund has been dispersed, but it's not enough. So what do we say to the famine and famine-like conditions that these people are already living in? Even if we don't want to describe these communities as poverty-stricken, they are experiencing famine-like conditions. How do we alleviate that?
Well...
You want to go first? Yeah, and then
I understand. I mean, the way I say it is like, it's not necessarily always about aid. And we're always, comparing ourselves to the West. Africa in itself, yes, we're rich in resources. We have more resources in the West anyway. Yes. In totality. But we're always using comparisons to the Western world. We need to mobilize ourselves. We need to find our resources. It's not about aid and helping us. I'm not saying initially, of course we need the initial, food, resources, light.
Yes.
We have people like Akon doing amazing things in Africa.
Yes, for the Akon Lighting Africa project. Absolutely.
We have the sun all the time. Solar energy. I mean, I'm not a politician, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's just like simple concepts like we have light. How do we mobilize our light for our own continent?
Yeah.
He's done an amazing job. We haven't brought generators in. He's used a natural resource and turned it around.
Yeah. So how do we improve the agribusiness sector in order to ensure that every citizen is able to eat, for example?
You know, one of the problems, I'll take it off from where Ngozi stopped, and also based from your last question, talking about AIDS. We always depend on AIDS and depend on all these handouts and depend on all allocation for stuff that is unsustainable, that is not regenerating itself.
Yes.
Okay? These funds, right, even if it's a fraction of it, that is used to turn around even the agriculture. And these children can also be educated in one way or the other, right? Then you would know that in another 10, 15 years or 20 years, they will be able to generate some kind of employment for themselves to also add to the GDP and also add to this. Poverty is what? Is actually a lack of social services. A lack of, lack of access to medical, good health facilities, lack of education, lack of proper sanitation, you know, and these are all the things that eventually cause health hazards. They're all interwoven one way or the other.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, if one aspect of it is not addressed, it will
affect everything else?
Yes, it will affect everything else. It will corrupt everything else and destroy everything. So it's, excuse me, what the AIDS does is to address, to isolate issues and address those isolated issues. We cannot resolve problems like that. We have to look at problems as a whole, in a wholesome manner and address those problems together for a long-term basis. And when you achieve that, you would have known that in another 30, 40 years, you would have scrapped poverty, and whatever you built, that period would last another 50 years.
Which is what you were talking about the development plans.
It's about development
right.
plans. 20, 25 years. I'm not talking about 5 years, 10 years. I'm talking about 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
If you look at the UN today, they're telling you the projections for the world population in 2050, in 2100.
Why aren't we able to do the same?
Yeah, or even if they've given us that and we're not doing it, what are we doing to address it?
Yes.
We are, by the 2000 or 2050, we're going to be the third largest, that's based on their projection, we're going to be the third largest population of the country in the world. What are we going to do about it? The infrastructure we have right now is the same infrastructure that was used when we're 30, 40 million people, you know? And now we're 170, 180 million people, everything is collapsing. What about when we now get to 300 million?
Yeah.
What am I saying? I'm saying that the infrastructure we need right now has to double. But again, the government cannot afford it. So that's why you come up with all sorts of models, the PPP models, but they're also the 4 Ps, the people, the communities, the rural communities have not been tapped.
So speaking about tapping into rural communities, now one of your biggest or 2 of your biggest competitors worldwide, or at least Africa-wide, are the Ivory Coast and Ghana.
Okay.
And Ghana, this is for cocoa production. Now, Ghana has recently implemented the ability to hand-pollinate these cocoa seedlings in order to increase production. So I'll ask you one final question. Are you going to overthrow Ghana as the leader, the worldwide leader in cocoa producing?
Okay, I would answer that differently. Ivory Coast is the largest producer of...
So we have 30 seconds.
Yeah, Ivory Coast is the largest producer of cocoa, followed by Ghana. There's no need, Nigeria does not need to overtake them. What Nigeria needs to do is to be able to add value to every single bean we produce.
Right.
And we'll probably make more money than Ghana or Ivory Coast are making together. And that's
spoken like a true Nigerian, never carrying last.
Exactly, and that's what we need. And once we achieve that, we know that we've resolved a lot of problems. Absolutely. And it will go for every single crop or every single product that we can have. And then we have the population to even consume the one that they're doing.
We don't need outsiders. So we're going to,
we can consume what Ghana is producing. We can consume what Ivory Coast is consuming.
We have to wrap up there. Unfortunately, I'm sure we can continue this discussion all day long, but we're going to break to eat some chocolates.
Thank you. Yes,
now that brings us to the end of the morning show today. Thanks once again to my wonderful guests, OBA Dokun Thompson, His Royal Majesty of the Oloni of Eti-Oni, and NGOZI OMAMBALA for joining me, Katura King. And of course, thanks to you at home for watching. From my entire team and I here in Lagos, all that's left for me to say is enjoy the rest of your morning and, of course, the rest of your day. Goodbye.